streaming.
Wait, it's now.
Oh, it's already.
Was that to stream?
I think it was more so.
No, live.
That's fine. Yeah. Professional.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you for always extending an open invitation to us to be here at the SRC meeting. We find it fantastically useful to get feedback. Hope we act on some of it, if not most of it, and there's evidence that that's the case. But we do absolutely value the relationship with our students and those who represent them. So. What I thought I'd do today, I think you have a paper that Tim prepared, which is a kind of student-orientated version of a paper on financial sustainability that went to our university court for the April meeting, and where the critical issues within it were noted and or approved by the court. So I wanted to just spend no more than 5 minutes putting that into some sort of context, and in the hope that if there are issues you want to raise or questions you want to ask, then this is a great opportunity to do that. Carl and I are here to answer as many of those questions as possible and as open a way as we can do. So the first thing that I want to say, which is not part of that paper, is just to remember that you are part of a university that, in terms of its academic performance over the last 2 to 3 years, is really doing exceptionally well under what I would regard as rather difficult circumstances. That is evident by us moving up in significant and important league tables. But to me, league tables are just a tactical outcome of all the things we do strategically to try to develop and enhance the university. And the thing that I think I'm most proud of within the university and represents something that is an achievement of everybody, and that means all right across the academic spectrum in the university, not just specific to one area of excellence or another. And as a result of the engagement with our students, is the performance in things like the National Student Survey and student experience tables, which we have been utterly outstanding. Thanks as much to you as to anybody in the last few years. we are the #1 university in the UK under 50 years of age, and almost certainly we'll get to be that for 2 years because we of course become 50 in 2017, so we'll get it next year. Nobody else is in that league table currently is near us, so and number 16 in the world. And that latter one is quite important because we've moved up a few places against what might be regarded as intensive competition from elsewhere in the world. So you are, I think, genuinely part of a great university and major contributors to those markers of success. But really, the point of today is to talk about some of the challenges that we face. And the extent of the financial challenge is probably best summed up by saying that in budgeting for 2016-17, that's the next financial year, we are facing approximately 11.5% shift from where we were in the current year, 15-16, in relation to the cost of delivering what we do versus the income that we get from in terms of the core support for research and teaching. And that results from cost pressures to do with the pension scheme, to do with national insurance contributions going up, which all businesses and activities across the UK are facing, together with other pay pressure, and then particularly approximately 4% reduction in the core funding from the Scottish Government through the Funding Council. So I think that the critical context then is 11.5% in 1 year from a roughly close to break-even position is a tough challenge for any organisation. It results primarily from external circumstances beyond our control, but nevertheless it requires us to respond in a concerted and appropriate way. And to do that, we presented proposals to the court meeting, initially in February and then confirmed in April, and asked the court essentially to agree a financial envelope for the next 3 years that will allow us to manage in the best way possible the transition from that very substantial change in the finances available to us for the next year into to return to a small surplus position by the year 2018-19. And the reason we need to manage it through, and you can manage it through in appropriate ways, is because if we can recover during that time frame, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and destroy all the good things that we're doing in the university for the sake of getting through the next couple of years. Nevertheless, there are some pretty tough decisions and actions that we need to take during that time. So the financial envelope that we agreed with the court was that for 2016-17, we will make a deficit, but we mustn't allow that deficit to be greater than £5 million. But over the next 2 years, we need to return to a surplus position, and the cumulative deficit within that 3-year period must not be more than £10 million. If we keep within that financial envelope, then the financial issues that we face are manageable and actually allow us, I think, to move forward with significant investment in some of the areas that are really important to us. So that's the kind of financial context. The second and critical point that I think is really, I imagine, quite important for you as a group is that one way you could cope with significant financial shift is to take out a proportion, an area of activity within the organisation. So we're not going to do that anymore. But that's not the approach that we want to take. We've made very clear decisions over the last few years as the financial position started to develop that we wanted to maintain the breadth of the disciplines that are part of the university.
be able to focus within the disciplines that we currently serve. And there are many ways that we can do that, and our plans are aimed at achieving that. Equally importantly is that the financial response has to be a comprehensive one. It can't be left to one part of the university to make savings and improve income generation, and others not being involved. Everybody has to participate, albeit in ways that are tailored to the particular needs and the opportunities that different parts of the universities have available to them. And the paper that you have describes a range of projects. First of all, savings for 2016-17, and then a range of projects that are labelled as being improving efficiency and achieving growth in unregulated sources of income, primarily from fees paid by overseas students. We also are targeting significant savings in the professional service directorates, but that's linked to the long-term plans to develop a range of services that are supported more effectively, both with digital solutions and other approaches. The upshot is that we are anticipating at some reductions in staff in some areas, but we believe that it will be restricted to relatively small numbers. It's critical that we achieve what's required whilst preserving the strength and quality of the student experience, and for the reasons I said at the start, that has to be a focus for the university. It is our universal and singular obvious strength as an institution. And therefore, we absolutely value your input to that. We need to continue to communicate with students in the best way possible. You have a particular part to play in that. It's very hard to communicate effectively to all students, but sending emails doesn't work. All sorts of things like that are not easy to do. If we had a meeting even in the biggest lecture theatre, one, it wouldn't be enough, and two, not many people would turn up to listen to me. You have a particular role because you are representing groups of students, and you can pass information on and you can pass information up. So very important that's why we attach such importance to attending SRC meetings when we can. I think the good news in the context of those changes is that last year we decided that we would restructure the university. Now I know that caused considerable angst among students. For all sorts of reasons, but that restructuring, I think, has been one successful from my perspective. You may argue about that from your perspective, but why I describe it is, first of all, we delivered it quite quickly, which is always an important thing with change. The second thing is that it's enabled us to respond, I think, much more vigorously to the challenges I've just outlined. And therefore, we are already in a position of closing in on the budget for 2016-17 with agreed savings, primarily through mechanisms that involve things like non-filling of vacancies and other relatively benign, at least in how they can be delivered, approaches, including non-staff costs. We've also developed a range of efficiency and growth projects, and those are described briefly in the paper, but they're gaining momentum. They're being overseen by a program board, and that program board has Tim on it, so there's a connectivity there into the student body, and that group reports to the university executive group. So I'm confident that they will deliver what's required of them in terms of some limited savings, but also key income growth, as I just described to you. I think we have good targets for next year that look achievable. Nevertheless, that market for overseas students is difficult and not helped by the UK's immigration policy. But we are, I think, working to overcome the hurdles in that give me reasonable confidence that we can achieve income growth, which is a key part. And for that reason, I think we're making what I would describe as excellent progress to achieve those financial sustainability targets that I mentioned at the start. And then finally, within that expression of confidence, I think there are two key risk areas. The first and most significant is that we have no idea what an incoming new Scottish government will think of its responsibilities to higher education and the funding it wishes to make available to its universities. We expect going into an intensive period of weeks, possibly a short number of months after the election, to establish a 3-year spending review and give some stability to the university finances across the sector during that 3-year period. But whether that stable position will be one that sees us grow back to where we have been, or in a worst case scenario decline further, will have a major impact on how we create a sustainable future. And the second area of risk, which I've already mentioned, is there's a lot of ambitious growth and a lot of investment to achieve that growth. Again, much of which is outlined in the paper. But the markets for overseas student recruitment remain pretty tough, and therefore there is a degree of risk in the scale of improvement that we're looking for over the next 3 years. So I'll stop there and invite questions.
Does anybody have any questions? Start with Kevin.
From the last court meeting, can I just ask, has there been any more progress with regards to what the non-staff cuts that are going to be used in order to make up the 11.5 million drop will be?
Well, the figure the deficit figure that we think would be need to be dealt with in the absence of the changes and the plans that we presented is 8.5 million, not 11.5% is a shift in our position from core. There's a whole range of non-staff components. For example, budgets that relate to the timing of replenishment of IT equipment and all that sort of stuff, and a pretty rigorous look at how all that is managed and handled across all of the schools and directorates. There is investment going into aspects of the student record system and all of that, all of which will improve the efficiency of business in those areas. And some of them might lead to staff cost reductions as well over time, but the timescale of that can probably be managed reasonably well with turnover and other things in many areas. Don't know if that helps. Carl, you've got anything to add to that?
Not really. I think Jim obviously line manages all the directorates, and so he has worked with the directors just to look at where savings can be made to try and reach that target. So I think he's rephasing a little bit of the investment in UODIT, for example. We are, however, trying to make sure we invest a little bit more in Natalie Lafferty and her team in e-learning development. So it's just looking at some of the priorities around what we spend our money on, some of the estates things, what can we do now, what do we have to delay until the following year, and so on. So it's kind of that sort of just drilling into the budget. So I don't have the exact details of it. Jim McGeorge is the best person, and we can certainly update Tim and I. Jim and I meet with Tim regularly and Leah, so that would be something we can certainly get to.
In terms of the academic schools, the school managers in particular have been, through the budgets with a fine-tooth comb, finding everything that they can strip out that is, that is in that non-staff category. but the important thing is that the changes have to be able to be delivered recurrently. So it isn't, you know, it isn't sufficient just to be able to take out a bit of, let's say, some of the funds that we use to support. You know, for example, you can take out money that supports the re-equipping of equipment in a teaching lab, for example. But eventually you have to reinstate it or reinstate it at some point. So we need recurrent changes and recurrent improvements, and that's where some of the challenge lies.
Okay. And can I ask how much, or what the projected figure? How much money are you looking to save through redundancies, or what is the aimed figure?
Well, the aim for redundancies is that we don't is zero.
Yeah.
In that, Kevin, of course, will know as a member of court that we asked the court to approve the position where we now are officially contemplating redundancy. In other words, we have to be able to do that in order to invoke our policy, which requires us to avoid redundancy at all costs, and that involves negotiation and discussion of all the changes we need with the staff unions. So we're now in a position where that's underway, and our aim is to achieve the reductions in staff costs in areas where we think that's necessary by avoiding redundancy at all costs. What we have said, though, is that we cannot eliminate the possibility that redundancy might be required. I think the evidence suggests that these will be relatively small numbers. There will not be dozens of people. It will be at most handfuls.
Well,
but every person is a person, so that's
yeah.
that doesn't diminish the trauma that individuals face when we're having to deal with these kind of things.
Andrew.
Yeah, in terms of cuts to the school, specifically what will the Principal's Office and Senior Management be doing in terms of cuts and savings? Because there is a perception of unfairness. In the Herald article in February, which I'm sure you'll be aware of, it stated you had the highest increase in pay amongst university lecturers that year, and among staff and students it seems it's okay for the schools to take the cut, but the top remain in a comfortable position.
Well, two things. I mean, that was a year before, and so those things are out of cycle, and that's not the case now. I don't really want to talk about personal pay, but your question was about the executive group as a whole.
Yeah.
The restructuring considerably remodelled the senior management team and university executive group, and the layers of management within the university. And overall, that's achieved quite a significant saving already, because we had 16 deans, we now have 9 deans, we have. And we don't have any heads of college who are part of the management team. We have 4 vice principals who now are focused on, if you like, corporate activity. So I think in terms of reorganisation and the process that leads to the possibility of efficiency, which is essentially what we're asking others to do, I think the executive group have certainly contributed. In terms of, there are symbolic elements of that, and I appreciate the point about pay rises for those who are well paid. One of the things that we have done as an executive group is many of us are now making annual charitable contributions to the development fund, and that goes to support a whole variety of causes and things of that kind. And obviously that's up to individuals to do.
Yeah. It's not, I don't want to get into personals of what your specific pay is, that's to you yourself, but I think it's the perception that when it is personal to you, it's also personal that we're talking about staff redundancies, because it could affect, and it has affected people, and that's been fine to talk about. I just think the perception that it is at the top, and maybe it would be quite nice to have senior management take a pay cut to help, and that could be a contribution towards the university funding, because it's quite a high pay. I understand that maybe something to take on board.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, well, as I said, those things are symbolic. The way the way that is done within the university is through an independent remuneration committee, and that's always chaired by an independent member of the court, and they take decisions about senior pay that relate to the sensitivity that you mentioned,
Yeah.
alongside the competitive position and the need to ensure that we have the right people leading the university, and that we wouldn't want to lose them at a time of crisis either. So that's done independently. So it's the personal side of it is taken out of it as much as possible.
Okay. So maybe something to look at their actions then, and see what they can do to maybe come more into line with the reality of cuts. Because if they're making these decisions, they can understand it's not your personal decision to take the it's not you that decides, but it's rather the excuse that, like, for instance, members of parliament use, that they're not taking 10% pay rise. It's an independent body. It's still maybe the perception that is actually more of a problem than the actual reality.
Yeah, I understand the point. I mean, I think that the senior team essentially receive the same pay award as everybody else, that's negotiated nationally. At the same time, all of our academic staff, the majority of our staff are on an incremental progression. The senior staff are not, but have access to occasional remuneration outcomes determined by the remuneration committee. So those are the mechanisms that exist to restrain senior pay to a reasonable level. I think if we took the decision that pay needed to decrease, then I have no doubt that the university executive group would put themselves at the forefront of that change.
Yeah, I just want to say that they're independent, but they are members of the university court, so they're aware of the financial position of the university. So they did.
Yes, they are.
They did take that into account in terms of setting the pay.
So I have 3 names on the list, and then I'm afraid we're going to stop it there. So Kieran, next.
Is there any insight into when the redundancies might take place?
Well, as I said, we're trying to avoid redundancy, but I would rephrase that by saying we do understand in which parts of the university we expect to see some reductions in staff. And so, as we've stated, I think quite publicly, one of the key areas, and this is because the financial position of some parts of the university is clearly problematic and needs to be more determined action, let's say. And humanities is one of the areas where there will be some reductions in staff, and as I said, the aim would be to do as much as we can to avoid that being achieved by the necessity for redundancy.
I think we'd like to try and we have to consult properly with all of the staff in the process, but at the same time, for the good of everybody, I think we'd like to try and move things forward as quickly as possible. So we hope to achieve that and come to the end of that process by the end of the summer, so that it's clear for those people if they're affected, or if people choose to leave voluntarily and they don't have to use compulsory redundancies or reduced contracts or whatever, so that everything's in place, because the quicker we can achieve it, you make the savings quicker, but also the quicker we put in place the plans to make sure that the student experience isn't affected, the modules are still delivered, and everything's planned to go ahead as normal in September, October.
And then beyond humanities, the other key area is in the sort of biomedical sciences. That's what we're trying to do is more fully integrate non-clinical research in the medical school with the bioscience research on the main campus, and that's the other area where we expect to see reductions in staff. We don't expect that to have a significant impact on students or student experience, because it's primarily targeted at the efficiency of research.
So I personally believe that difficult times you have to make difficult decisions, and difficult decisions could not be accepted by many people, and this is normal. But I want to see where is the end to this. So we can see that the deficit is going to end in 2017, 2018. What's the potential of growth, or when are we going to say we're over the deficit part and we're going to increase, or is it going to be, or are you going to keep on cutting year after year, because obviously you might get less funding, or so yes, we have to do that, but cutting the budget for 3 years or something is reasonable. But what's after that? So how will you be able to increase funds? What are the plans for growth? Because we've seen Dundee, I mean, I've been here personally for 3 years. I've seen Dundee improving a lot over the last couple of years on ranking, and that obviously helps a lot when you're an international student and stuff like that. And I'm obviously, like, there's no need to say that you guys have been doing an amazing job, but where can we say that we're going to be over this deficit part and we're going to start improving?
Okay, so the point to make really is that there are actually rather few things that any university, particularly in Scotland, where the funding is somewhat different than elsewhere, can actually do to improve income in a way that creates a net surplus over the costs. You can't do it in research. We're really, really good at getting research grants, and they actually cost us more money than the income they generate. Now, that does all sorts of other things for the university in terms of our reputation, but that isn't a source of the growth that you're referring to. Secondly, we currently estimate that the funding currently provided by the Scottish Government for our home and EU students accounts for only about, well, it's now less than 95% of the cost. So even if that's a fixed number anyway, and so you can't grow by improving that. So that's why you come down to the students that we recruit from elsewhere in the UK, where we can charge fees up to £9,000 a year, and from overseas, non-EU overseas. So in a way, that's the only game in town. So as you can imagine, the growth plans therefore focus heavily on that. They require considerable investment in our, if you like, penetration of overseas markets. They require one of the big things is the creation of an international school here in Dundee, which will help us to grow, particularly undergraduate markets, which are vital because they are. They're cumulative over, say, 3-4 years, depending on the arrangements and other things of that kind. So the growth plans, and if you look at this university compared to others of a comparable size, we are way below what might be regarded as a benchmark for income from those sources. And so there's considerable headroom, even in a situation where it's getting more and more difficult to do that and the competition is increasing. So we're pretty confident of our ability to grow that. And that's how we come into surplus, a combination of greatly improved efficiency, especially in relation to the kind of research that we support, and in delivering teaching modules more efficiently, but by growing substantially student numbers from elsewhere. The problem is that I can't answer the question in the way you phrased it, because you asked me when are we going to be when are we going to come out of that and be in exponential growth phase, at least in significant growth phase, to get to a point where we have the funds to invest more solidly in our future. And the reason I can't answer it is I don't know what the Scottish Government's going to do. And if the Scottish Government come back with that 3-year spending review and say, period of continuing austerity, universities are going to have to face 5% year-on-year cuts, then what do I do except to come back and say we need to find another 5%, folks?
Well,
not necessarily by cuts, but so that's ultimately the problem, and there are risks around the income growth strategy. But
so thank you for clarifying that. But can you assure me and the SLC that the university is putting maximum effort in recruiting international students? And I'm personally one of those students who pay 11 grand a year, and I would like to ask. My brother could be doing it next year also. So good, encouraging. So what type of main question for me is what type of pressure are you guys putting on the British government in order to change this immigration policy? Because this has personally been been one of the most difficult things for me, and I think many of the international students over here. Like, we invest a lot of money, whether it goes up to like 60, 70 grand, and I'm doing this with my father and brother also, and we get to leave the country once our visa ends with our studies without even getting a chance to continue.
All right, yeah. So you can do that at the level of individuals, at the level of individual institutions. We lobby ourselves very strongly on that. I have met Theresa May in her office. I've told her exactly what I think of her policy on behalf, and I've done that on behalf of University of Scotland. I'm the convener of University of Scotland. I'm the vice president of Universities UK. The sector as a whole could not be more united in its lobbying of the UK government. More significantly, in Scotland, following the referendum, with the Smith report, we managed to get into the Smith report a requirement under further devolved powers for Scotland to be able to have a post-study work visa on its own. Now, that has not been given the priority it needs to, and we're lobbying hard to put that at the top of the agenda from our point of view. That won't solve the problem, but it will certainly create an impression that Scotland, unlike England in my opinion, is open for business, and that's what we're trying to do. So I couldn't agree with you more.
Sean.
My question may be a bit more specific to one school, but in the paper, it talks about cuts to humanities. This university, as well as the city of Dundee as a whole, has got quite a proud tradition, or at least a proud reputation for being a university that's open to underprivileged students, that's open to students from disadvantaged backgrounds. But humanities is traditionally the area where most successful for these students. So if humanities is going to be cut, and the understanding of the paper was that there's going to be cuts in full-time members of staff for humanities, and there's going to also be a reorganisation of humanities towards international students for the liberal arts. Reshuffle. Try to think about different words I can use to say reorganisation. So, if also the paper talks about 150 spaces that the funding's been cut from, maybe reinstated, but no one in this room can say for sure, unless Nicola Sturgeon's head on the table. We don't know what's going to happen there. So, if there's a cut to the school that's traditionally the place where working class students can go on to progress, and there's also going to be a reorganisation away from the traditional areas where working class people come in. What's going to happen to this university's reputation for being an open university to other public students if the cuts are going to unfairly affect the courses where they traditionally find their home?
Yeah. So Carl is the executive group sponsor on the project around humanities, so he's going to explain our position on that.
Okay. We're not cutting student numbers in humanities. We are not relying only on humanities for widening access. So every school in the university has a target for widening access, and every school, right from our most selective like medicine, dentistry, are increasing their places for widening access. We're given an additional 10 places in medicine this coming year for widening access students. We recruit over 750 widening access students a year. It's about over a third of the entire intake of the university. So that's not a specific humanities thing. They have reinstated. We believe we will get the additional funded numbers, the 150 additional places, and we put that in our budget because the Cabinet Secretary was very clear that that should happen from the Scottish Funding Council. So we expect to receive that funding. We will expect to continue to be very strong in widening access. So we're not cutting numbers in humanities. We're not, even when they announced the funding cut of 1.2 million for those 150 places, Pete and I discussed it, and we gave a commitment to our admissions and recruitment team. We will recruit the same number of students as though we had received that funding. In other words, we will not move simply to follow the funding that the Scottish Government gives us in this area. We are absolutely committed to widening access. We have made the best progress of any university in Scotland in the last 2 years. We have made a third of all of the increase of widening access has come from this university in the last 2 years. So we will not compromise on that. What we're doing in humanities is that some parts of humanities are operating at an incredibly efficient rate, up to 75% efficiency in terms of the amount they return, like philosophy. There's not enough staff in philosophy. I think those of you who've been in philosophy will know that it's too thin on the ground. There are too many staff in history by comparison, and it's not fair on the philosophy staff, and it's not fair on the English staff that they are delivering to that number of students with fewer staff than they are in history, which received quite a bit of additional investment over the years, and that hasn't been matched by increases in student numbers. And that's become particularly clear with the move of politics from that school, which is also a very efficient teaching department, into social sciences, which left history with a slightly lower student number that became quite visible within the school that it was not performing at the same level in terms of the amount of students that were being taught and the amount of research that was being done for the number of staff. And we can't afford that luxury of having that many history lecturers to deliver that program. It's not necessary because philosophy and English are delivering an outstanding program with even higher levels of student satisfaction with fewer staff. And so that's why we've had to look in particular at history.
I'm glad to show because it would be a real shame if Dundee a lot of me, like I probably wouldn't have got in without waiting access. Like so it would be a real shame if if Dundee didn't continue. It's not just reputation, but obviously it's evidence of that. But as far as history goes, surely cutting lectures would just mean there'll be less uptake, and the more specialities take away from history, the less and less students will want to do it. And the university sort of has a obligation to the city as well, because it's Dundee's history that this university teaches as well as. So if there's cuts to lecturers in history, will not just create a cycle where less and less students will uptake it, or is that like
I don't understand.
I'm trying to mitigate that won't happen, because it'd be a shame if history just cycled right out of history. It'd be quite a shame to a city whose the university whose history department is so good, but to a city whose history is wound up in the basement of the Tower building.
We're not reducing history in the sense of wanting to reduce the student numbers or the reputation. What we're trying to do is make it more efficient. We can deliver the same quality of student experience with fewer staff because other parts of that school and other parts of the university are patently able to do that. We've just got into a situation where we cannot afford to do that because it impinges on the student experience of other parts of the university where we're not able to invest in philosophy at the moment. So within the humanities budget, there is a new lectureship post in philosophy, which is urgently needed. But that, unfortunately, has to come from history.
As far as widening access, I mean, you couldn't have a more passionate kind of, whether it's a university executive group, all the way through the university, more passionate commitment to that. And the point you made about obligations to the city, well, I wouldn't say we have an obligation to the city. I personally think we're umbilically attached and part of the city, and we don't survive if we don't help the city to thrive, and vice versa. That's the relationship. It's not about obligation. It's about a kind of a visceral connection. That's my personal belief. I've been here 27 years, so I'm almost a Dundonian, but the accent doesn't really demonstrate that.
Cheers.
Sorry to anybody who didn't get a chance to speak, but I'm very conscious of the time and how much we've got to go through. So thank you very much for coming along to speak to us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
And would you be happy to take questions if anybody had them after the meeting? If there's any an email?
Oh, please do. No, absolutely encouraged. So just do that. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Right, thank you very much.
Just to also say that I sit on the programme.
We should be applauding the questions.
If anybody has any questions as well, then I'm at the programme board, which meets once a week, which consists of Jim and George and all the other key stakeholders, so I'm happy to have some comments.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you for coming, Jimmy.
And guys, 81% National Student Survey return.
That needs a round of applause.
Big record. Previous best was 77%, and that was already, when I arrived, it was 65%. We're now at 81%. That's engagement of all you guys, getting those people out and getting people engaged. Fantastic. Thanks.
Well done. Thanks a lot.
So you'll notice in the agenda that we've got, it says that Mark Coleman is coming to speak. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it due to a scheduled conflict. So we're just going to move straight on to minutes of the previous meeting. So anybody have any questions, comments about them? Would anybody like to propose? No? Really? And second? See who that is. Done. Okay. So now moving on to motion one. So Thomas. sorry, just before you start, can I remind you that we are live streaming, so could you project your voice and swear? There you go.
This motion seeks to Global University review its assessment methods due to exams mainly being a quite unfair process of assessing a student's quality of grade. What you had avoid was 80% of your exam was, so it puts a lot of pressure on a student. From what I've heard from a lot of people, also it seems to assess someone just as well, if not better. So quality's put into it in a stricter grading system. There's more leeway on exams, it's often just call them every game, you have to have an exam a day. Or simply remembering the brain dumping, which a lot of people do. It doesn't seem fair. I'm not saying they're trying to get rid of exams, but knowing the percentage of a total grade of a semester or year, as well as moving the diet, say first semester, it seems unfair that you can get an exam on it within the second semester as opposed to it being within the first semester. That's about it.
Do any of the other proposers have, any of the other authors have anything they want to add to that?
So what we want to do is basically make sure there's more of an aim in actually learning throughout your degree, rather than getting to the end of the year, deciding, oh, my exam's in 2 weeks, and having to sit and cram what you need to know to pass the exam. We want students to get to the end of their degree, graduate, and actually have the knowledge that employers expect you to have, rather than the sort of short-term memory skills to go in and pass an exam. So that would be one of the main aims of the motion, as well as reducing the stress that is put on students at the end of semesters. So 80% is quite a lot if you have 3 hours and it's hit or miss if you're going to pass that module and get the degree classification that you want. So that's the main aim of the motion, is to just sort of sit down and talk to whoever's in charge of the assessments and sort of come up with a fairer way that's going to benefit students.
Leah?
Yeah, I just want to say that I brought this up at Quality and Academic Standards Committee on Friday, and so that's chaired by Carl, who just spoke to us. And he said that it's welcomed by the university, and the next steps would be, whatever the outcome of this motion is, we'll take it to Learning and Teaching Committee, which is a week today, or 2 weeks today. I think it's a week today. And we will discuss it there. So that makes up of all the Associate Deans of Learning and Teaching from all the 9 schools. So if we have this passed, this will be the suggestion to that committee, and then we can then talk about the policy and the way of implementing it into the university. One thing that I want to stress is that some courses and degree programs are kind of authorised by an external board, say, so you've got the Law Society for Law, or there's civil engineering and engineering boards that kind of place restrictions on the way that people are assessed, and that's the same in medicine, dentistry and nursing professional degrees. So there will have to be some discretions for courses that are accredited with external bodies, but we can go as far as this in any other course that doesn't have these restrictions.
Jenny?
I really like this idea. I just want to bring attention as well that there are modules that have one essay that's 100%. It should be looked into as well, because it causes the same amount of stress as an exam at the end of the semester. But these 100% essays are really rare to come across.
Yeah, I had a module last semester with one of those. They're not fun.
No.
But yeah, it's just making sure that it's a fair way, that's not putting all the pressure in one piece of work or one exam, and it's giving a fair representation of what the student knows and not just what they do for that one assessment.
Kieran?
I kind of got involved in the motion because, like, when you've got the 80% kind of thing, if you have an off day, you're kind of screwed, aren't you? Like, it's not really fair. Like, so if you've got kind of a bit of a buffer where you can't, you don't want to do bad, but if you do bad, it's not as bad.
No, it's detrimental to your module outcome.
Yeah, not detrimental. You can be that speech, right?
Yeah, I'm not opposing this motion per se, but I think it's just important to maybe consider that different course types and different modules have different, they attract different sorts of people that learn in different sort of ways and perform in different sorts of ways. I completely empathise with, for example, science courses, because it is just cramming vast amounts of information in your head. I mean, like I've seen the forensic anthropology work. It's ridiculous. It's really hard to get your head around, and you're doing it through like listing off rhymes and stuff to remember that. So in that circumstance, one final year exam is very, it's understandably probably going to damage people who have an off day, but then equally on the other hand, if you have courses like law, for example, I would argue that actually the exams are more lenient and more fairly marked than assignments, because assignments people can just go, I disagree with your interpretation, and decide. And I mean that's happened before. You know what I mean? That's not just a perception or thing. It does happen. People who disagree with your interpretation or critique on law can mark you down. So what I would maybe request is that if this is brought forward to teaching quality and academic standards, maybe it just pays attention to that. There is a distinction between different courses and the different skill sets and the sort of people. I know, like, it's not like we're all divided into houses about who learns and who performs better. It's just the demands of the courses are different. You know?
And we don't want to get rid of exams altogether. It's more making sure they're fairly weighted, looking at coursework as well, making sure that it's not a ridiculous amount for 20% and it's all due at the same time, that kind of thing. It's a sort of overall view of how students are assessed and not just getting rid of exams, but that's where I get all my marks.
Yeah.
Don't want to get rid of that. Kaylee?
It was actually on that point. Not a criticism in any way, but is there any suggestions you would put forward to this meeting about how you would offset that extra percentage? So would you more suggest the coursework that is prescribed on that to be more heavily weighted, or additional coursework? Because, for example, this year we had 6 deadlines, including a 26-page report and our dissertation in 18 days, which was insane. And quite frankly, at that point, I would have sat 100% exam if it meant I didn't have those deadlines.
I'm the exact sort of same boat. There needs to be a complete review of how much coursework students are getting and how much it's worth. Like, I've had a couple of assignments due in the same week, and I've had to decide actually that one's only worth 2%. I'm better off doing the one that's worth 5%, even though they all take me nearly a week long to do. Just like making sure the assessment is fair for what it's worth. It's the same sort of standard, sort of university-wide, and the same effort required.
Yeah, it's saying I support it. It's just a case of, make sure that we're not saying, oh, this is what we want to do, and then they add coursework to everyone, which only adds up.
Ron?
I wanted to just highlight that the motion is currently phrased around, exams should not be that high or anything. Wouldn't it be easier to phrase it in a way that's no single assessment, and so it should be 100%, because that's probably what causes most stress.
Yeah.
So whether it's necessary
Makes
one exam,
sense.
so just wording words.
I want to highlight the same thing Kevin said. I'm just afraid that personally in law, we prefer exams than essays, and I hate it when my essay's 40% or 50%, because that means like I'm done. So I would rather prefer exams. I think what I would propose is that the motion, if it goes through, that it should go through consultation, and that consultation, obviously the deans, but the deans should not make the decision themselves. It should go down to students, and students should give a feedback. It's going to be a long process, but just to make sure that students are not treated unfairly, because I would personally feel really bad if my essays are more than 25%.
Just to be clear on that, so there will be the associate deans from each school, but also other academics throughout the university at the committee, and then there is student representation for myself and Tim, and also Kevin and Indra. So we could suggest to Learning and Teaching that we hold a focus group led by Carl or someone.
But then I'm afraid the focus group does not really represent every student who is involved in the course right now. So every student obviously has the right to agree whether his course should be changed or not. So I'm afraid, like, just how we ask for students for feedback on courses, I think every student should have the ability or the platform to say whether I agree or not. Obviously, I agree. I prefer. This is great. There's a student representative on the focus group, but at the end is a student decision, and I personally would feel unfair if you guys change my grade into 60% without telling me. So, as a personal point of view, maybe it's wrong.
So
but
the motion says 80% max. It shouldn't be 80%. It should be 60%. for exams.
Yeah.
But would you in law have exams that were higher than
Well,
that?
we've got exams for 75% right now in law,
Okay.
25% essays. We've got only one module probably that the essay is 40% and the exam is 60%, and I'm not really happy with that module at all.
Just a direct follow-up on it, is also worth mentioning that the law assignments are actually quite big.
Yeah.
They're
4,000
never,
words or something.
yeah, it's never any less than 4,000. Whereas where it's not, what would be the fear for law students, I think, is that if you gave you more than, if every module gave you more than one assessment, that's like the entire year's gone. By the time we get to exam times and stuff, you can't learn any of the actual course material.
Think about law is very subjective. Like I got a B1 from my essay just because my lecturer said I didn't like the way you wrote it. It's just simple like that. So it's not really that there's any standard that you can put on what you should be doing through. So I just say that every student should be involved in this process. Just simple.
Thomas, is your point directly related to that, like as an author of the paper, or was it something different?
Kevin and Thomas, just when you two were saying about students who do well at exams but don't do well in coursework or better in exams, I mentioned this before, but so I've been put in or go forward much more about sort of fair compromise and having partially or full scene exams to give people the benefit of the doubt in the sense of if you're really bad at exams, it's a little bit seen, you've got to answer 2 questions, you've been given a certain number of questions to answer, you can then go in and have a knowledge you're happy with half that exam, as opposed to going in, the exam's 80%, not doing anything, or relying just on, predicting what questions are going to come up and hoping it's going to swing your way, whilst you have a little bit of a confidence boost in the sense of, you know what half the exam is, you're going to be a bit more better on the other half, or you can spend more time trying to revise the other half, whilst coursework's still there.
Yeah, that sounds great, but at the end, students should make the decision. That's what I feel.
Okay, is that a direct response?
Would it be like through like the schools, just like a kind of online thing?
Well, it could be like, for law, for example, at the end of each course, we give a feedback from the course where you just say whether it's very good, or how it was. So I think part of the feedback would be just attach a paper to it. Do you guys think we should make the essays more like graded higher, or should be something online, whatever it is, but just take the opinion of students, I think.
Sophia?
I just want to make a comment about the second part, which is fair timing of exams. And there's an example here of risk information. If Kira was here, she would back me up on this. I'm a class rep for 3 years in business school, and every year we bring this up. The business school is well known that in 3rd year and 4th year, whatever you do in the first semester, all your exams are in May. And every year we bring it up, and every year and all the lecturers turn us down. And they tell us that we don't have enough time, not only to study, but because they want to give for us essays over Christmas that need at least a month of research. And if you have your exam first and then the essay, it's supposed that the module is over, so that's why they do it. And this is how business school is run, and we've been trying to do it every year, and it never works. Everybody just sat us down to have all the exams, because the materials are very big to cover 4 exams and have essays on it as well. It was just a comment to let you know this is actually an issue and it's been happening in business school.
Yeah, it was just like on a general point, like law, I know we're talking about law quite a lot, but we've tried things like this. Like last year there was a 50% essay, 50% exam, and before term started they changed it because students weren't happy with so much weight being put on coursework. We've tried 50% exam, 25% coursework, 2 types of 25% coursework, and students have been unhappy with that as well, because you've got nothing for, like, you're spending more time actually doing the coursework rather than actually doing the studying for exams. So I think it might help certain people who've got less weighted exams, but I think maybe, yeah, for law for instance, I don't think many law students would be happy with currently, like they're not overly pleased with it now, but no one's pleased with exams. So I think, yeah, I don't really support this motion because I think it's more weighted towards people that like coursework rather than someone like myself that prefers exams.
Direct response from Ken.
Yeah, kind of. Basically, I wouldn't go as far as to oppose it. I just want the motion to take into regard the different. Basically, there is no one size fits all when it comes to what suits fit. And then secondly, eventually students cannot set standards for which we are assessed, because this is, you know, there are national committees that are, if one university was dead easy to get a degree and everybody goes to that degree. In fact, that's happening just south in England now, because universities are making it deliberately easy to get a degree in order to bump their money up. There just isn't really I completely sympathise with the science courses and courses that have a similar learning tactic, and I agree that there needs to be that issue needs to be tackled. But I think I'm prepared to support the motion as long as regard is paid to the other module or courses that maybe that the approach that we would take on science wouldn't fit them.
Just something quick, like adding on to Kevin, I mean, if we really want to make changes to this motion, we need to keep it reasonable, we need to keep it within the reasonable limits, so we can actually see change happening. And I think offering change within like science modules and stuff that could happen, but offering, for example, students to put the reassessment for themselves, I think we're going a little bit too far. So like, I mean, going for the reasonable goals first, and then after that we can go for more. But let's achieve the minimum first. That's what I believe.
Like this motion, what we want to get is an SRC backing, that
exactly.
we do want to discuss the sort of assessment policies. Like not this is going to change everyone's exams. It's more just to show that students do want more of a say in how they're assessed.
And that needs to be clear. That's
John.
Two very quick points. First of all, that the discussion of subjective markings come up, and I think that's something that either needs to be brought up entirely separately, because that's common across almost every school, particularly in humanities, where there's not a lot less of a scientific approach, there's a lot more subjectivism to points, and I think that that's something that probably would need to be discussed separately, because someone's saying, oh, my lecturer changed the way this was marked because they didn't like the way I phrased my point, and the evidence I raised is different to how the assessments are weighted, and I think that that's something we need to discuss entirely separately. So I think we should maybe bring that up in a separate way.
Essays are moderated by 2 or 3 members of staff though. So
yeah, but it's been raised and I just wrote it. And then secondly, I really like the motion. Maybe look at the School of Psychology, because the year we came through, they changed the weighting third year, which is the worst year in psychology, because you've got 4 modules each semester, and they're all really heavily exam weighted, 80% exam, 20% essay, and whilst it didn't go perfectly the first year, it really did, they spaced out the coursework a lot more, and in comparison to the previous years, it was a lot nicer for students, and I think that's really useful for understanding of connection modules, and working out how exactly modules should balance across modules. I hope that made sense. Probably didn't.
Do you want to respond to that, John?
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much changing the whole university, it's more looking at individual kind of degrees and seeing if that would suit them better. It's not so much we're putting a complete blanket on the whole university. Like, I think it needs to be looked at individually for individual degrees, as it's clear from talking to you two. Like, I think we don't want to be like, no 80% exams, that kind of thing. So I think having a look at everything individually and seeing how that's going to work will be the best approach.
Response from Kieran as well.
I think we just kind of come to a consensus where we say we kind of support this kind of review of it and pass it on to the schools, so that the schools can contact their students about it. Tell me if you know.
yeah, you're right. So basically, learning and teaching, if it was to be passed, it would have to be a university-wide policy, because under the One Dundee umbrella, they kind of pass everything if it's going to affect everyone and not just certain individual schools. However, it can be discussed that certain schools should perhaps adjust the way that they assess students, because it's maybe not benefiting them as it is benefiting the law students or whatever. But I mean, we can raise it as we will. I'm sure it'll probably pass anyway. And it can, rather than just saying we want a cap at 60% for exams, we can say we want more choice in how students are, more student choice in how students are assessed.
Final question from Sean.
No, it's not so much a question of sort of government, but it's like, just to echo what Ron said, like all the arguments that come up about, you know, someone saying like they don't mind the exams. If it's just no single assessment or project carries over a certain mark, and that means that if you personally prefer exams, then if this is negotiated with, I can't believe I forgot the name of the council who's done it 20 times, like the committee that
Learning
wants to do next
teaching,
week, they might discover that the law is best suited to exams, but by voting against it, it means that discussion can never be had, it can never get off the ground. So, just if we say, if what is possible for you, I don't know how many people are proposing here, like 4 to change maybe to what Ron's put in, and it means that at least there can be discussion over it, and I'm sure that people, like, the people who will discuss it are, you know, it's their job to take into account what we say, it's their job to do its best, you know, they're not going to just turn around and say, like 30 people vote against the SRC CLA exams. But by voting for this motion, it means that at least that discussion will be had, and hopefully for the vast majority of students, a more reasonable outcome will be reached. All decide that the way it is now is the right way to go about it, but at least we know that a review would lead us to a definitive solution.
Can we get closing statements from?
Yeah. So just to reiterate, this is to have a review of assessments and actually go to the learning and teaching meeting with this consensus from SRC. It's sort of, we've put some suggestions in the motion, but that's not concrete. That's all up for discussion within the panel with other students, and we just want to see if there's backing from SRC for a review or not.
Is everybody clear on what they're voting for? So with 20 yeses, 1 no and 8 abstentions, the motion passes. So moving on to motion 2. Motion 2, Jalal.
Paper D is a motion to propose just making the voting procedure in the SRC more transparent. It suggests that the live stream does not go off when we vote. This is because, as SRC councillors, none of us is a private member. We are here as representatives for other students on campus, and the students that we represent are different constituencies. Everyone represents different group. They deserve to know how we're performing and if we're keeping up to what we've said our policies or our plans are. It's not a matter of privacy, it's a matter of accountability and transparency. This is how it is in every parliament, for example. This is part of the sort of democratic build of the SRC, just basically to improve on the democracy, just as we are, sort of, in a way, we are public representatives rather than private members of the SRC. We serve the students' interests rather than our own interest, so they deserve to know how we're voting on matters that affect them eventually. And that's why I propose that the light does not go off, and if we're doing a roll call vote, that the minutes would record the votes, and they will be, as they are published on the website later, that will be no issue for me.
The first point. Can all the observers in the room please raise their hands? Yeah.
So
So, yeah, so non-SRC members. So if we were to actually care about the privacy of our votes, we'd have ordered all the observers out of the room right now. We didn't. Whenever we do have contentious debates, we usually have observers. In fact, the one that springs to mind is the military recruitment one, when we had the entire OTC plus thing. Now, there's an example. Now, you know, I was against that, but I acknowledge that they had a right to be there. They had a right to challenge me, and I had a right to have a go at them back, and that's fair enough. It is about transparency. If anybody's going to suggest the argument that it's going to be, it's intimidating or whatever to have your votes recorded. I'm sorry, they're already recorded. Everybody in this room plus the observers can bear witness, and we're not bound by any of the privacy or anything like that. It's just extending the facts of this room to online.
I don't have really strong opinions for or against this motion, and think it's a good idea. One thing, however, is that it's been talked about that it should be transparent so that councillors, the people who councillors represent, can find out how the councillors voted. But I think we should turn that on its head and make a kind of suggestion to those who represent students, the exec included, that we discuss the motions when we get the papers. So Becca's been good on sending out papers a week or two before the meeting. So councillors should then discuss those motions with the groups of students who they represent to find out their views before presenting the vote at the SRC. Because I think it only makes sense if that happens. I'm sure some councillors do it, I'm sure maybe all of you do it, but if we make a kind of promise that that'll happen, then it makes more sense. I don't see there's any issue in transparency if we do that.
Just a brief question, why do we turn it off? Because if there's no purpose for it, then this is a bit of a simple
Like,
motion,
who
isn't it?
said we should turn it off?
Basically,
who said we should turn it
in
off?
the bylaws, it says that all the votes should remain anonymous. If I'm correct, Stuart, you can probably let me know more.
So it's just not.
Yeah, because
Sure,
it's
it's
not
like
in the
walking
bylaws,
bylaw.
and obviously the filming of the SRC meeting is a new thing that's been happening. Then there is no reason why we wouldn't turn it off.
Because if we vote on things that are really contentious, students will kill us.
I know. It's not like we're elected.
But then that's your responsibility. I mean,
Sorry. Thanks. That's a very simple point. Yeah.
Sheer democracy.
Jenny? I should say that it's not 100% sure if SLC next year will be live streamed.
Why?
It's up to the manager if they have the crew to do it and time.
I'll come back and do it.
Tim needs a job.
Things that were not communicated would then do that and turn off the live stream.
I could feel that burn from here.
As the team doing it, we need to know when we do turn it off and not. So things are sensitive and not communicated.
Yeah.
Would that be a time?
but then, sorry, can I?
Direct response.
Oh yeah, I don't think there's anything sensitive. I mean, do you not see Parliament closing, what's it called, just closing the votes or closing play? Like, I'm not sure what kind of sensitive stuff we speak when we.
It was just brought up to me before when I was discussing it with someone that sometimes things are left off the record when the chair's recording it.
Does anyone know about it? Like, what sensitive stuff that could be?
Well,
it's just a
we're
question.
not going to discuss the sensitive stuff.
I've got
What are they then?
one more. For British Parliament, it is not recorded if it's recorded that an MP is either drunk, disorderly, or asleep while in the Commons, which is reported to happen, but they're not allowed to live stream that. But they are allowed to stream their votes. So, I thought I'd drop that in.
Andrew, can you?
Yeah, I was just saying, like, I think it's quite good because, and if there's anyone that's feeling quite nervous about it, maybe a suggestion that the live stream is continued turned off and the roll calls published like a few hours later if they're nervous about doing it on live YouTube. But I do think it should be allowed to continue broadcasting all the way through. But maybe it's something for people that are a bit nervous or just not really want to be put under that pressure.
Just as a sort of side note, myself and Stuart had a discussion earlier on this week about the sort of future of SRC and the future of voting. Obviously I won't be here, and the majority of you won't be here either. We might be looking into sort of investing in electronic means of voting, but that's completely up to the next council and whoever's on that. And also, Jalal, is this to be put in for this SRC, or is it starting from this SRC, or is it from September? This one?
After the motion.
I'll put it in.
Shall we just leave it on?
So I'll put it in the minutes, then everyone's vote, if it's passed.
So at the moment we do roll call. What happens with that roll call?
It stays on my desk.
What's meant to happen with that roll call?
Do you know what? If Tim Hassler was here, this would be ideal for him. But strategically, he's gone home sick. No, he actually is sick.
We have the first televised roll call.
Not for this motion.
We have to vote first.
Any other questions or comments or anything? Ready to move to a vote? Oh, John.
I'd just like to say, if you did move the SRC to somewhere cooler, the university has a lot of AV systems, so you don't actually have to have this TV streaming. They could record it themselves.
I think, generally, sorry, just to sort of develop on my point, there are a lot of things that happen with the SRC that are not sustainable, such as my role as a convener, as well as other aspects of my role. There needs to be more development in the SRC, particularly when it comes to raising your profile as representatives, with the website, adding minutes to the website, adding agendas to the website. And this is all sort of part and parcel of trying to ensure that students get more engaged and that we are more up to date as a students' council. So as Dom says, if we're going to move it to somewhere else, we might invest in technology, we might make it a bit more, I don't know, modern. So, but that's probably maybe 3 or 4 years down the line. Just depends on how much money there's available with Dusa and with the university.
So ready to move to vote? Would you like to do it?
My motive to abstain.
So 27 yeses and 2 abstentions, the motion passes.
Joel finally passed the motion.
Well done, Jalal. 3 years of hard work.
So guys, can I just get a very quick show of hands? Who would like a 5-minute comfort break?
Just Andre.
And who's happy to continue?
And the rest.
Can we
We have a lot to get through.
Yeah. Let's just keep on through. We've got exams.
So after the next
We'll switch line thing.
Don't cut at all. Okay, so we'll do a quick break after the next motion. So next motion, leave over to Harris. There we go.
Thank you. Yeah, so basically I brought a motion to introduce 2 positions, two positions of BME and LGBT rep to the SRC. I think personally we are behind in terms of like representation of BME and LGBT students. The vast majority of organisations, let alone student unions, have these positions, and they give. So the vast majority of student unions in Scotland and the UK have BME and LGBT reps, and after doing research, they actually have whole working groups dedicated to trying to tackle issues that affect these students. I had some concerns raised to me. One of them was that we've already got an E&D rep, so aren't these groups covered by that? But I think these groups are actually large enough to warrant direct representation, especially if we give disabled students a rep and mature students a rep. I think BME and LGBT plus students deserve to have a direct representative on the student council. And another point was about the SRC efficiency. I think bringing these two new roles will actually enhance the representative process. I mean, the last year, councillor and president roles have been cut, and I think this could help sort of make up that deficit of representatives. And I think it would enhance the quality of the work we do if we have a more wider range of views in the SRC. And the last point is that BME and LGBT plus students know best about the issues affecting their communities, and they're probably the most suited people to sort of lead efforts of trying to represent and work with others to try to mobilise more participation in student politics from their respective groups. And yeah, basically just to conclude, I would urge everyone to vote for this motion, and I think to abstain or deny these student groups a voice on this council is really going against the majority of student opinion on this issue. I mean, I've talked to quite a lot of students. I mean, today we've got representatives from BME students and LGBT plus students, and I think we've got some from the Indian Society as well. And I know that Alex has a statement from the LGBT Society itself. And yeah, I'd urge you to all vote for the motion. Thank you.
No, I was just going to say, just remove my name off the list.
Leah?
Yeah, so I support the fact that we need to have further representation for groups such as LGBT and BME students on campus, and I do think that those groups aside, there are also other groups on campus that are underrepresented. We have quite a lot of females, but also other universities, their SRCs, they have a women's rep, they have a, I don't know, I want to get into every one of them because I'll surely exclude someone, but women's rep, for example. I think that in order for Dusa and the university to work more closely with groups that are underrepresented, we should take the lead from within the SRC at the moment, and also the executive. So the quality and diversity reps, we have 2 of them currently. I would suggest that the 2 quality and diversity reps, along with the VPSW next year, Tara, form a subcommittee of the SRC. It'd be a welfare committee perhaps that has reps such as LGBT rep, a BME rep, a women's rep, so on, so on, so on, to specifically target campaigning for these groups to work with hosting events, which Dusa does do some. We saw a really good example in Loughborough where they have a welfare committee. Me and Tara, we were there last August and we were really keen to set up something like that, but it didn't happen this year. But I think next year, with the VPSW being a full-time role, there is more capacity to work with these groups on campus. So while I support the need for more representation, I wouldn't support the representation being through the SRC, because I think we need an actual committee to focus on these issues. And I think that currently having the quality and diversity reps on the SRC to kind of head up that committee and drive those ideas, I think would be better, rather than just creating perhaps more bureaucracy within the SRC by having 2 heads from 2 groups that are underrepresented. I would suggest that we have loads of heads from loads of underrepresented groups.
Would you like to answer?
Just in terms of, I mean, so are you proposing a working group set up from the SRC, or because right now there's not a single black student on the SRC? I think that in itself is a problem. Having a BME representative would encourage students to go for these positions, and again, back to the point about BME students and LGBT students, they're the best suited to sort of lead these groups. So I think we should set up these groups as well, but as well as having the official representatives on the SRC, because those students are the ones that know more about their respective communities. They know how to more about how to mobilise students to vote and run for elections, and they know best about the issues that affect their groups, and that's my response.
Kaylee.
I have 2 points. First point, this was actually raised in academic year 2013-14, and our emeritus president, Mr. Ian McKinnon, made that exact same point Leah just did, that there are so many underrepresented groups. We have to be very careful with the kind of reps we do and don't allow. In terms of mature students, the current figure that is it may make up 22% of the on-campus population, which is a huge amount. Whereas, as an example, as an LGBT plus make up 8 to 11% and does fall under the equality and welfare field. And so it's very difficult to then keep adding additional roles. And I really support the idea of a working group instead. Second of all, if you make them SRC positions, are you then willing to turn around and say you can't run for this position because you're not LGBTQ plus or you're not BME? You can't limit the students, and you can't say you must run for this because you are LGBTQ plus. It gets in a really difficult hot water situation.
Just quickly respond to that. Just in terms of running for positions, I mean, like, it's sort of implied. I mean, you're not going to get a fourth year running for a first year rep. We don't have any problems currently. You're not going to get like a undergrad student going for like a post-grad representative role. We don't have any issues with that right now, so I don't think we have issues with that.
I've got 3 people that want to do direct response. I've got Omar, Leah and Kevin.
Right. Shall I go first? So can I just restate what Kaylee and Leah just said? Are you guys just saying that we've got a lot of underrepresented students in the university, so we should not represent them? So we should not create a place in the SLC to represent them?
Can I clarify that?
I mean, that's what I understood, that we have a lot of underrepresented students that should not be represented in the SLC. I mean, the purpose of the SLC is to represent students. So if we're not willing to represent minorities, then who are we representing?
Who does the equality
What's the
and
problem?
welfare
Just, can I continue my question first? Can I continue my whole statement and then you guys can respond? Yeah, so my statement is that if we don't represent minority students, then why are we here? Second of all, I don't see any harm in having representatives for minorities. I see that as a benefit. I see it as something that takes the organisation forward, not something that brings it backwards. And second point is that when you mention, for example, like who should be running for the position, I personally think the position should be open for everyone. Everyone has the right to run for the position, and that's it. People will elect whoever will represent them better. You don't have to be part of that minority in order to be represented, in order to represent them. And I'm pretty sure that group, whatever minority, will put a representative forward in order to represent them well. But please clarify to me, how should we not represent minorities?
I will just clarify. Me and Leah both said there are several underrepresented groups on campus, that we do want representation for those students, but by adding just arbitrary additional SLC members, at what point do we say stop? Do we say 200 SLC members, 300 SLC members? There are always students that have differential needs than the rest of the
And that's why we're representing.
And the current roles of equality and welfare reps, which we already have on the SLC, that is part of their job role, and to put an additional focus on these groups that clearly want and need additional support, a development of an equality and welfare subcommittee should be made so that these issues can not just be done in a response to problems, but be proactive in enabling these students on campus. I don't think it's necessary to add arbitrary positions to the SRC for every minority group.
I don't think it's our
Can I please make a response? Please respond to that.
Can I give him first direct response and then
Right, so I understand the argument that Leah and Kaylee are making, and I, to a certain extent, I can see where the source of your concern is. It's basically, is this going to be a slippery slope argument? Are we going to start representing things? Now, we have to refer to the history of BME representatives now, and really, we did our research on this. There isn't really, right, okay, put it this way, Queen's University Belfast. Do you know what the immigrant population of Northern Ireland is? It's like less than 1%. It's really, really small. And even then, ethnic minority groups, even fewer. Every NUS university has one standard. Every political party has one, a standard, both Labour and the Conservative. I'm not sure if UKIP or Britain First would have one, but like this is, I mean, and various private companies and stuff like that have it. The reason that these two, let's call them, let's say, constituencies based on special protected characteristics, which is language that I've taken from Dusa's own bylaws. The reason that these two constituencies have emerged over time is because society has recognised that there are problems here, and there is a need for special representation because of oppression and social issues. And also, it's worth reflecting that these, these both the definition of BME and LGBT changes over time. For example, I don't know if any of you guys have heard of, well, you definitely have, Yanis Varoufakis, former financial minister of Greece, and all-round bad boy. In the late 70s, he was the BME officer in the Oxford Union. The reason being, now today we can all kind of say, no, Greek people are European. They've been in the European Union for a long time, but at the time, Greece was just going through civil conflict. A large influx of Greek immigrants into Britain made them fall into the character of a minority ethnic group. These things change over time. It's not something that, right. It's not an arbitrary category. It's not, there are lots of different groups and stuff like that, but they've been in formation for over, since the 50s, really since the Afro-Caribbean communities arrived on British shores. These aren't things that just spring up over time. They're certainly not things that are going to spring up year on year in the SRC. It's not going to be an accrued number of SRC councillors getting created year on year for the next one and the next one and the next one. This is a really long-term thing. And let's face it, if we do need an additional member for somebody that society as a whole recognises as worthy of representation and worthy of special care in order to help them, then surely we should intervene and help, and surely we should give them thing. Now, luckily, we're not in a sort of society that oppresses groups willy-nilly, and therefore that probably won't happen. But the simple fact that is the argument that the creation of two new SRC councillors is going to suddenly create a slippery slope in which we're creating, I don't know, SRC members for people with blonde hair, or Irish SRC representatives, or Scottish representatives. It's just not going to happen. It's in practice, it doesn't exist. That issue is a non-starter. I understand the concern. It's a non-starter.
Just a quick response to that. I mean, this is the norm. The majority of organisations give these groups direct representation, and you can see within political parties, other student unions, other groups, you've not had hundreds of demands for, like Kevin was saying, people with blonde hair, Irish people, whatever. This is the norm, and I think we should give these students the opportunity to have a direct voice on this council.
Yeah, just firstly, Omar, when you're going to make accusations on camera, please consider what you're going to say.
I didn't make an accusation. I asked for a restatement
you
of your
position.
position.
You asked if I'd identified that there's people who are underrepresented on campus, and then suggested that they don't get represented.
It wasn't making an accusation.
Yeah, okay, and I'll answer it now.
Well, that's great.
Okay, so I suggested that yes, we need additional representation for underrepresented groups on campus, but I don't think we should add them all to the SRC. I suggested there's a separate committee, a subgroup of the SRC created for these students. Through my time at Dusa, I've noticed that there's loads of different students underrepresented on campus that you might not think of off the top of your head. Distant learners, for example, they're severely underrepresented. Commuting students as well, and mature students. Although we have a mature rep, they still feel underrepresented. Let's cluster the committee with mature students. No, but basically, I feel we need a separate committee created, and I think that would be a more pragmatic approach. And if it's a working group, that it's not just committing to the SRC, not just voting on motions that don't necessarily directly affect those groups only, they affect every student. And we can, through all of us, we're quite diverse. I mean, there's not actually that many Scottish-born people on the SRC from what I know. So I think we have lots of diverse groups here, and that's a great thing about Dundee and Dusa, but I think having a separate committee that can actually work and inform the SRC on what to do would be a bit more of a better approach.
Can I just ask as a direct response? Very, very quickly, please. Okay, of course. I understand what you're saying, and you make, but can I just present the following viewpoint of this? BME and LGBT plus representatives are something that, as Harry said, exists on almost any UK university on the representative council, just positions, they're set. And by saying it, and by saying that they should get additional kind of representation, but they shouldn't be present in this room and be on the SRC, it can be seen as quite offensive. That, yes, in a way that, yes, we want to represent them further, but there should be a separate.
So we have 2 equality and diversity reps to head up that, and they should just one. Yeah.
Could I have that response to that?
Speaking. Yeah, just real quick. Yeah, I understand the point again about, like, for example, we don't represent long distance learners or students that commute, but would you accept the argument that the issues, you know, it's not comparable. It's not about, like, the struggles of the of long distance learners and people who have a hard commute are not anywhere on any scale next to the problems that face LGBT or BME students. It's not, you know,
No, I'm not trying to be offensive.
I know,
I'm not suggesting that.
I'm not suggesting you are, but can you accept that there's a difference in gravity of those two situations that might warrant why we have a special protected characteristic, not just a consideration.
Could I just make a request to shut the blinds?
Yeah.
You talking?
The only one that was
No, it's in my eyes, that's what it is. But just keep talking, please. Alex?
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm the Secretary for the LGBT Society this year. I've got a message from our current president, Sally Melville. It says that the Dundee University LGBT Plus Society gives full support to the notion to introduce a specific LGBT Plus representative on the SRC, and we believe it would help foster more and increase LGBT visibility on campus. She does not use commas. And help LGBT students become more involved on university policies and actions on issues of inequality. It would also help better represent students in the creation and implementation of university policy, something that individual societies may not directly engage with currently. By featuring wider diversity, what is my phone doing? Basically, diversity is really good. Also, on a note, is that we base a lot on the LGBT society. We base a lot of our modelling and our structure on Glasgow University, which is seen as one at the forefront of LGBT representation in Scotland. And as Harris already pointed out, they have these positions, and when you research it, almost every single university in the country already has these positions. Now, I can't really talk for the, what's the anagram? BME. But in terms of LGBT, again, every single university, all major companies have these issues. When you're talking about creating a subgroup for the equalities rep, that's a really good idea. However, you'd still have the issue of you'd have to create members of that subgroup. So you'd then have the same issue of, cool, do we have LGBT members, women members, every single minority you can think of, so you'd still have that issue. Whereas a lot of the issues can be covered if you just put these 2 reps onto the SRC Council. That leaves the equalities rep open up to then listen to the other issues. In terms of backing up Kevin's point, long distance learners and things are really important. However, they can then be focused on by the inequalities reps, and we can talk about things that really affect us. And if, say, for example, the inequalities rep, that's probably not your term, I'm very sorry. Say if they're not ethnic minority or they're not LGBT, then it would mean that someone who is LGBT, who is an ethnic minority, would be drafting the legislation in the first place for it then to be as maximum effectiveness. So then means they'd just be passing it on to the equalities rep, whereas I would think it would just save time if they're the ones drafting the response in the first place and then passing it on to council and then better able to discuss it and debate it. I think that's everything I have written on my hand. But yeah.
I accept that idea. I understand what you mean by equality and diversity, but I do think we come to a danger when it gets to only having the two groups represented and the others not, with the official title of being a councillor. At Glasgow, I had a look, and they actually have so the sexual orientation equality officer, a race equality, mental health equality, gender equality, students with disabilities, charities, clubs and societies, which we have, and an age equality officer. These kind of officers are what I see should make up this subcommittee, with two lead councillors coming here. Because essentially the only thing that the councillors can do that are different to the equality and diversity rep would be that they can vote on motions. And if the committee is there for a deciding body for the rep to then form opinions when it comes to the voting, I think that would be the best approach. But that's my opinion. I mean, obviously we're not all going to agree on this.
And I think that's a really good idea, but I also noticed that Glasgow is got really high stats in terms of good student satisfaction on these issues. But I'd just like to reinforce the point that the norm is, in every university and a lot of companies, is that these already exist. I don't want to say the word behind, but we are behind in terms of where we stand right now, and I think we should move forward to become the average and become the norm when it comes to these things, and then move forward to then include these roles like Glasgow.
In terms of direct responses, that's fair enough, but like we've only got an hour and 15 minutes left. So Gillian's got a list of names here, so if we could work through that'd be awesome. Yeah, so just keep your points very minimal. I don't mean to take over, but I'm a bit conscious about time.
Sorry guys. Are we moving on to we're going to move on to the next point. So Dominic Janker.
I really welcome this motion, and I think that equality and diversity is a catch-all phrase that if you look at the actual workings of the university itself, you can see that it doesn't really mean anything these days. Because of the great work of Alex in the LGBT society this year, the university is actually joining Stonewall again. It's joining the Race Charter alongside Athena Swan that it's already been part of for a while. And whilst practically it might actually make sense to make the E&D representative on the council have the target remit, that won't really work with regards to representation. The SRC, whether or not you are aware of it in your own dealings as a councillor of a school president, you are an incredibly powerful tool when it comes to influencing the university. The university has just opened up their LGBT plus staff network because of the great work that they've seen the LGBT society do. And for the university to do that, it means that we should be going further and further beyond in terms of representation. Committees are great, and practically it could mean that you make the E&D councillor take on the remit, but committees are only good in places where they're actually efficient, and unfortunately I don't think we have that culture at Dundee at the moment. If we're brutally honest and look at our own committees that we have from the SRC and splitting down groups, what we are good at is influencing the university, and I think that we need to have that strong message, take on these representatives that need to be represented at this level, and not be afraid to add them to the cohort. And if we need more seats, let's move the SRC to a room with bigger seats and actually invest some money into making the SRC stronger. But I definitely recommend that we move forward with this. I'd also like to see mental health equality officer as well.
Kieran.
I think that's a pretty big issue right now, isn't it? More kind of reiterating what Leah said, there is a lot of groups that would be underrepresented. Like I for one would love a Swan UCA if I were rep, but I'd be the only one. But it's kind of different because like BME and LGBT have completely different issues to the ones my vested interest have. Like people might have a go at me to support Swansea, but it's just induced laughter. Too bad or something. It's different for BME and LGBT. Like a lot of the time they're discriminated against for various reasons. I also like expanding the role of maybe equality officers and giving greater support to them might work as well, because in one of my many snips this year, I moaned about not having a local rep. But that's just me. there's got to be a way we've got to engage with students to speak to them to see what they're wanting represented at, instead of just putting like a group together that decides for them. It's okay to applause.
Yeah, just made quick few points. Obviously, I do support the motion strongly, and I do believe that Alex will want to say it, but we are a bit behind. This SRC is the main student representation body, and it does seem like we're a bit behind when it's compared to most of the universities in the UK, or institutions, or political parties, or small organisations, or just anything of that sort. And it's not good to call it an arbitrary position. Like LGBT plus rep and BME plus BME rep are not arbitrary in any way. They are historically significant, especially in this country. As a liberal democracy, they have just a major history, and since after World War II, basically, since the 50s, and they're not just something that Harris just came up for this motion. So it's good to call them that. And the committee is a good idea, but to suggest that the committee is a solution, is avoiding the issue again, it's just basically shoving it under the carpet and not talking about it, while SRC does suffer from a deficit, a major one, from the SRC councillors, and we've been promised that there will be introduced, like, new positions introduced to SRC to increase representation. We've had a deficit of at least five school presidents being removed, 6 councillors being removed since last year's review. School presidents were removed because of the restructure, and councillors were removed due to the motion we discussed last year and we passed. And there was a suggestion from the executive members that there will be new positions introduced to improve and make it better, the education structure that we do in SRC. But that never happened, unfortunately, and this is just a very, very humble suggestion, just to introduce two new positions. This room does maybe fit us all now, but again, as Tom suggested, maybe just to improve on our work better, to make it more efficient, we may have to move a better area, better room, maybe with built-in cameras, just for that. Just something to improve on from the SRC, but this is in no way trying to hold it back. It's just trying to make it better, and we're trying to keep up to the level of other universities and just not behind anymore. So that's why I suggest everyone should probably consider voting for this motion.
I still have names on this list, so I've not gotten to you yet. I'm really sorry, but I'm getting there. Sean.
Just a couple of quick points to rattle right through. I mean, like, when I was brought up, I was always told by my mum that if a woman says something is a woman's issue, then it's a woman's issue. So if the LGBT plus society say then that we need it, then we need it because they're the people that know best. If BME students say we need it, then we need it because BME students knows best. I mean, I'm not in a position personally where I can say that they're wrong. So then we have to support what they say because they're the experts. So the people who have to go through this every day, the people have to be discriminated against it every day. And if these groups say that they need a representative, then they need a representative. I mean, 10% is still a big number of the student campus. I don't know the BME statistics. I mean, my only disappointment with this motion was that there wasn't a women's officer added as well. Like, that was my sole, like, right in my head. But I was like, that's for another day. That's a totally different debate because you get a totally different response. But as well as that, we've got a working group. I mean, if Ian McKinnon suggested it in 2013, where is it now? You know, it's 2016, 3 years later. If that was the suggestion 3 years ago.
He was against it.
Well, that should start point
I
down.
do
But
agree with you.
and the way that we work as an organisation that completely changes every year and membership every year, it's very difficult to keep up with working groups when you don't know who's going to be there to help them run and help them get into our discussions every year. And yes, we are quite well represented now. I mean, if you look around the room, there's lots of women, there's lots of BME students. Don't know how many LGBT plus students are, because it's none of my business. But that doesn't mean that's always going to be that way. That's just a coincidence of the people who are involved in student democracy this year. But if we create these two positions, it means there'll always be at least 2 people who are dedicated to that. So if it happens to be that one year that every single person in this committee is white, at least one of them will be there for BME students. And just to go back to the first point, like, if these groups say that that's an issue, then it's an issue. And people from outside those groups don't really have the experience to say that it's not an issue. Because that's just the way the world sort of works.
Jan.
So I agree that the fact that underrepresented groups are underrepresented is a big problem, that they should be represented more. And I think LGBT plus and BNP groups are one of these underrepresented groups that definitely need representation on campus. But I think adding them to the SSC is not the right way of doing it. And I think although we have spoken about how committee works and do not work, and if that's the right way of doing it, I think it's better than adding 2 more positions to the SSC, because I think the SSC is already too large right now and could be more efficient if it was smaller. I think the SSC in general needs some sort of restructure, and in order to make more efficient and in order to enhance student representation on campus. And if we would start a whole process of restructuring the SSC and student representation, then the addition or like the focus on representation of LGBT plus and BNP students could be incorporated into this process. I think that's the right way of doing it. And I think, as I said, adding them to the SSC is not the right way of doing it. And the sheer fact that other organizations and students associations have these positions does not mean that that is good. Maybe there is a more efficient way of solution of solving that problem. So we should not be kind of led into wrong conclusions there, that because other universities have these positions, that's necessarily a good solution, if that makes sense. So for these reasons, I oppose that motion. I agree that we need to represent underrepresented groups, but adding them to the SSC is not the right way of doing it.
Direct response, just one question.
Can I go in direct response from Alex first, please?
So your version of making the SSC more efficient is creating more subcommittees and having less representation. Normally I don't like going with the majority because normally they're wrong, but in this situation we kind of do need to go with the majority because that is what's working, and more representation is probably normally better. And yeah, like your idea, okay, we'll make less representation on the SSC to make it more efficient, but again, you then have less representation and therefore not be doing the SSC's primary role of representing students. Sorry.
Direct response from Greta?
I just have a question then. If we have different people, when do we say stop? And second thing is, then if we add, let's say, 2 subcommittees, I completely understand people might be underrepresented. But then what's the point, if we add them, what's the point of having equality and diversity rep?
Response from the equality and diversity rep.
I just want to, about the point of my role, I'll talk about a bit later on. But first of all, I'd like to just say, what's the worst that can happen? You guys realize that we're opening up 2 volunteer elective positions. And even if the worst case scenario happens and there's more than these 2 and there's more added to it, what's the worst that can really happen? There'll be more people in this room on the SRC, there'll be more, these meetings will take longer, and there'll be more motions presented to the SRC. I really don't see why people think that this will actually worsen representation and worsen the SRC if there is more counselors on it. How does this make it worse? Yes.
Can I say the view I see it? So basically, if you are equality and diversity rep, and let's say you lead that subcommittee that Leah is talking about, why can't you represent that subcommittee's voice? That's what happened to School of Social Sciences. Let's say there's no longer going to be a direct person for School of Division of Psychology. That's it. My role, that's the last person, last probably psychologist that I'm representing here. We're going to have one person that represents that. So why couldn't that subcommittee include all the groups that are underrepresented? So let's say women, LGBT, BNU, all the groups. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be represented. That's the case. I acknowledge the fact that you need extra representation. But a lot of groups do have issues and they need to be represented. That's why I actually completely agree with Leia's suggestion.
Okay, I respect that. But can I ask you something? You're president of psychology. Do you believe that there should be a president of psychology?
No, because we're no longer School of Psychology.
Well, no, you're now, after the restructuring, no longer School of Psychology. But that's true. But do you think that your position shouldn't have existed in general, and there could have been when School of Psychology existed, there shouldn't be a president of psychology? In this case, we actually have the opportunity not to expand this. It's not about budgeting, it's volunteering positions. And yes, being on the SRC and having a direct vote, I think it's better than actually having a subcommittee which makes a decision as a subcommittee, and actually that person is on a lower rank. They can't actually address just exec, they can't sit on the SRC directly. This is again a group decision that's gonna happen in the committee. I can okay, let's say I'm the head of that committee and I can represent it, but if on that committee one person wants to bring up something but 3 others are against, probably I can't quite do that. It's much more offensive in a way just to be a part of subcommittee instead of being allowed to be on the SRC, especially since it has been brought up. And I don't think it's the same. I don't think that having these 2 reps on the SRC actually makes my position obsolete. Not at all. I think there's plenty to be represented.
I'm afraid we're not taking any more direct responses, and we're going to go back to the original list. To the last name, we've been waiting for about half an hour, Dominic Marshall.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a really good debate, and I agree with Jan that the committee is far too big and that a separate committee should be made for this. The example I'll give is, if you look at this debate right now, I'm sure there's half of you who are really engaged and we're having a really good debate, but there's also half of you who can't wait until it's over, because different issues interest different people. And a lot of the conversations I've had with the Dusa exec, because we have similar problems in the sports union, that you want to engage people and actually make change, but if we're having this discussion and it's such a big group, you're not going to get things done, or you're not going to cover a lot of motions. And for me, as a sports president, and historically the sports president doesn't get that involved in SRC, because a lot of the issues don't really have a huge influence on us. However, equality and diversity is something that we have been involved with this year. In varsity, we did a rainbow laces campaign for Stonewall. All the varsities did that, and that's something we were really keen to get involved with. But for instance, with sport, getting people more engaged and getting LGBT students feeling more comfortable to participate in sport is on our agenda all the time. And if we have a separate committee to go to on that issue, and we can get their input, that's fine, because it's an ongoing issue all the time. If you have 2 LGBT representatives on this committee, you will get your input, but there's about 30 other councillors as well, and you're not going to, I think you're not going to make as much change as if you have your own special committee, which has relevance throughout the whole year, and people can feed into it and extract things from it. And if you have 2 LGBT representatives or 1, what if it's a gay male? What if it's a lesbian female? Then is that excluding other people within the LGBT community? And if you look at LGBTQ, it changes all the time, as I think Kevin pointed out earlier. You know, it adds a new letter every year. I think it's LGBTQ.
No. That's not what I said. I said they were well-established protected groups.
Yeah.
These aren't arbitrary things. They're well-established groups from a protected characteristic that have evolved over 70 years now.
Yeah, I'm just saying
completely taken words in my
We're
mouth.
all clear, and also you didn't even email the LGBT society that you were doing the rainbow laces thing. I found out because I happened to be in the gym that day. How can you expect us to be involved in these sort of things and get the student body involved if you then don't communicate with us? If we have a representative here, we could actually get stuff done.
But we did communicate with you on the thing.
Look, we did
Sorry. That was something which initiatives that we tried to get together.
Do you have anything else to add to your point, or is that?
Can I comment on the size? Just the size of the SRC. People forget that it's reduced by 11 people since last year. If someone wasn't here last year, it's been changed 11 people in deficit since last year. So it's much smaller than it was last year. And it's much smaller. Stop saying it's a huge.
Can we move to Harris for closing statements, please?
Yeah.
I've been waiting on this since after my last
I would just urge
everyone.
I would just urge everyone to vote for this motion. I mean, it's the BME and LGBT students that are here today and are wanting it, and I think for you to deny us that opportunity of having a direct voice and vote on this council really is a disservice and a step backwards for the SRC. Thank you.
Sorry guys, but we've got 2 other motions to get through, so we just need to
It was more a suggestion.
So is everybody clear on what is the voting on? So yes, no, or abstain, and the live stream is staying on.
For the first time ever.
Okay.
What a way to begin.
No pressure.
No pressure. Hannah Boyd.
Abstain.
Kieran.
Yeah.
Anna.
Yes.
Aaron.
Yes.
Keely.
No.
Miriam. Sophia.
Big yes.
Nadia.
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
John.
Abstain.
Sean.
Yes.
Harris.
Yes.
Jan.
No.
Greta.
Abstain.
Ron.
No.
Liam.
Yes.
Jalal.
Yes.
Andrew.
Abstain.
Jackie.
Yes.
Please no noises.
No noise.
No sort of. Robert.
Yes.
Holly.
No.
Leah.
Abstain.
Dom.
Yes.
Indra.
Abstain.
Omar.
Yes.
Tara.
Yes.
Dom.
No.
Kevin.
Yes.
And I'm a no.
So with 17 yeses, 6 noes and 6 abstentions, motion passes. Guys, you have until 10 past 8. We're going to take a break.
What are they?
And by saying a sub-individual you can't make a call on the SNC and say, oh, we're going to cut down the president's
Sad.
Welcome back. We're going to pass it over to Aaron for motion 4.
Hello everyone. So this is just a brief motion I wanted to kind of formalise here at the SRC with the Dusa exec, etc. So just going to give some background. I've been working with Lorraine Anderson, Sandra Ozer and Keith Mackle, who work across student services, OPD, and also with support from the Vice Principal of Research, I think he is, Tim Newman.
Yeah.
Get confused with all the titles. About getting a welcome day for research students twice a year for the October and February intakes. And really just wanted to get the SRC support in getting the Dusa executive to run a small little research soiree for research students, just to kind of mix and socialise, thus building a engagement between Dusa and the research students that are coming in for the next year or forthcoming years. And yeah, just to get some formalised support from Dusa basically. So I think I just wanted to keep it short and sweet, so if you've got any questions then go wild.
Kaylee?
Great idea. That's it.
Thanks.
Done?
Love it.
It's like the Guardian 5-star reviews.
He was prepared with his bulletproof vest right there. He was like, go on.
I don't think there's any serious.
Is there any
I think I'm
particular
ready for
way
this.
in which, like,
No.
sort of events or
Well, I know like Leah and Dom, they coordinated an event with the postgraduate life sciences research people, and it seems to think of them well. And we're basically doing something like that, but just in coordination with official Dundee University welcome event really. So I just wanted to throw a little party. That's all.
everyone loves parties.
Any other questions or comments, reviews? Okay, let's vote. We don't need to summarise.
Do we need this by show of hands?
No, we need to, obviously now we need to record names. After the motion, which just
That's something different. Anyway, roll call, let's go.
We've lost quite a few members.
Sorry about that.
Hannah Boyd's
That's
not
against
here,
the law.
no? Okay. Kieran, are you still here? No. Anna?
She's not here.
She's not here. Aaron?
Oh yeah.
Keely Watson?
Yes.
Marion Belford? Sophia?
Yes.
Nadia is gone.
Yes.
Oh, you're here, sorry. Thomas?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Sean? Is gone. Harris?
Yes.
Jan?
Yes.
Greta?
Yeah.
Ron?
Yes.
Liam?
Yes.
Jalal?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Jackie?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
Holly?
Yes.
Leah?
Yes.
Dom?
Yes.
Indra?
Yes.
Umar? He's not here anymore. Tara?
Yes.
John Marshall?
Not here anymore.
Not here anymore, goodness me. Kevin Burton?
Yes.
And that'll be a yes as well, why not?
So now, motion 5, I'm going to pass over to Leah to chair this motion.
Okay, so I'm going to chair this motion as it's to do with Dusa Media, and Gillian and also Alex, who's not here, kind of has a bit of conflict of interest when it comes to Dusa Media. So pass over to Dom Younger for the motion.
Yep. Hands up of those here. Have you read the motion? Okay. So, as we speak, we have student media alumni working at various media outlets, the BBC, Vice, New Scientist, more locally the Courier, and admittedly one's now at the Daily Mail. But what Dusa Media actually represents and presents is a consistently evocative channel for students' voice. It doubles as a career pathway, and triples is a space where students can learn skills that they otherwise would not get at the University of Dundee. What this motion does not do is that it doesn't enshrine Dusa Media above anything else, like it doesn't enshrine it above societies. No, what it does is that it enables the already protected student-run department to have a little bit more insurance going through tough times. No one is suggesting that that if, not when, things are hard, introspection of budgets will not be necessary. It probably will, and that the media may have to have budget cuts in the future. What the motion generally means is that all of the hard work of previous and current media won't arbitrarily be dismissed without coming to the SLC first. If the plans of the incoming media managers come to fruition, then Dusa Media is actually generally going to get stronger, bigger and better, and that is one of the main reasons why we lay this in front of you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, yes, Andrew.
It's just also important to note that Dusa Media is entirely student run, and that it's one of the biggest avenues for student voice on campus outside of the SRC. So we do accept contributors from any aspect of the university, and we actively look for them. So it's a strong voice essentially, and we just want to protect it.
Okay.
The reason why it's not protected is that there is no mention of it bar the introduction of media managers through an anti-cadence kind of election system that we got rid of way back in an SRC motion. So essentially it's not in the bylaws. That's the reason why we're doing this.
And they've got copies of what currently exists of the Dusa Media and Dusa Memorandum of Understanding, which is what we currently run by. So it's the obligations of both Dusa and Dusa Media, which is essentially what we want to bring into the bylaws. So 20 copies if you'd like to share. Yeah.
Okay, so I have Kaylee up next.
I'm sorry, I have to talk a lot. I'm graduating and no one will listen to me once I'm left. Just a quick question. It says that the Memorandum of Understanding dictates the commitments and contributions of Dusa and Dusa Media. Does that dictate the working? So, for example, Jenny said earlier that we may or may not have certain functions next year. Is there anything there that it says what the basic services that they're expected to undertake?
No, because it differs per manager. Each manager comes in as the executive, like different policies, different goals for the year, and it's not dictated other than obviously running your media outlet, because everyone kind of wants to take in different directions depending on what they think it needs. So we don't want to dictate that essentially.
Yeah, just a response to that. Obviously, I understand that, but if Dusa is committing to say, space and the incredible bar tabs and all these other things, would it not make sense to request that Dusa Media provide certain basic functions? Obviously, and the undertaking of that is at the discretion of the managers?
I think it potentially does already in the sense of training skills and such. It does cover, it depends on what level you're talking here, whether you are talking, you have to have a certain output of content, or whether you're talking like, we need to be there to train skills, we need to give a voice essentially, which is in there.
For example,
Hold on, right. Let me just think. Right, so Kaylee, finish up.
Yeah, for example, so many issues of the Magdalene need to be put out in whatever way, and including whatever content that they require within the year. It's not sufficient for the Magdalene manager to say, I just want to put one yearly one out. That there are certain expectations that come along with the contributions that Dusa is making towards the department.
I think that would be something that would have to be annually reviewed, and I don't necessarily think it'd be a bad thing to put individual managers' sort of policies and ideas into the memorandum each year, because it is reviewed by the PPCC every year with the new managers. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, beyond just obviously maintaining the channels, which is in the different code of conducts that are reviewed annually, and the memorandum itself. So, for example, if you don't produce a copy of the memorandum, you're going to get that. That happens now. So beyond that, there isn't that much in terms of stipulating that you have to do it, because again, there has to be creative freedom that Dusa Media has in being able to go down different avenues. If, for example, the whole of campus really wanted one publication that was just all about poetry, why not?
We did it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But just to say, every month there is also the media guidance panel, which involves external media companies, as well as Dusa and certain members of external relations within the university that come in and guide the media managers. So those that have an expectation to fulfil their role are also given development and support along the way.
Again, Dan, hold this like
John?
So just from a purely my the outlet that I have been in charge of, the online outlet that, like, each of the previous managers, Harrison, Felix, Catherine, myself, and then Alex coming up, we've all done completely different things. And Harrison, we set up the website, Felix set it up as an outlet, and then he really worked on investigative pieces, but Catherine moved more to magazine-style journalism that the magazine goes through. I worked on redesign.
Okay, it wasn't a question of content, it was just basic provision.
Whilst with the magazine, you can potentially say put out X number of things. It's very different with the other outlets, like going with the radio shows, how many radio shows you put out, because that's entirely dependent on the number of volunteers. With the online, that's dependent on what content you have, on the interest of the student body. With TV, it's on what ideas you can get, what equipment you have available, and what time you can commit. I think that putting X number of things must happen is restrictive to creation of content itself. I think the current memorandum of understanding says we've got to maintain the outlet to a standard that is that the MGP agrees with, and then we're reviewed by the MGP, and that's the way that we're sort of regulated in terms of what we produce. The VPCC also does that. Like, if Don thought I was doing a crap job, he would have either sat me down and gone, John, you're doing a crap job, or would have asked me to step down. And I think that's more on. I don't know why you're laughing. Worried now. I think that setting exactly what must go out reduces the creative freedom that Dusa Media is allowed. I think instead sort of saying you need to keep the outlet to a set standard is a better idea than going you need to produce 8 issues or 25 videos per month or whatever.
Okay.
So that's the one way to do it.
Thanks, John. Jenny will be the last speaker on this unless anyone else has got something different to add. Nope.
I disagree with what Dom said in relation to a thing of saying the policy should be written into the memorandum, if that's what the manager should, or the outlet should try and carry out throughout the year. Especially because we have to write 3 policies when we apply. And we write them knowing how much time we can commit, because it's a voluntary position as a manager who runs the outlet. So yeah, I was just saying I agree with Dom, saying the policy should be what we carry out, not a set thing for every year.
I think that's everything, so we'll move to the vote. Do you have some names? Oh, you read the names. Oh, that's great.
That's the only reason we need. Aaron.
Yes.
Keely.
Yes.
Miriam. Sophia.
Yes.
Nadia.
Yes.
Thomas. John.
Yes.
Harris.
Yes.
Jan.
Yes.
Greta.
Yeah.
Ron.
Yes.
Liam.
Yes.
Joel.
Yes.
Andrew.
Yes.
Jackie. Yes. Robert.
Yes.
Holly.
Yes.
Leia.
Yes.
Dom.
Yes.
Indra.
Yeah.
Tara.
Yes.
Don Marshall Lloyd and Kevin Burns.
Yes.
And I'll be again.
Okay, so this motion passes.
Well done. Excellent job.
Sorry.
A very positive day. I could just suggest random things.
Okay, so that brings us nicely on to media manager updates. Well done, Jenny, for submitting your update. So updates from John and Andrew, please.
Did you? Obviously, pay careful enough attention to you.
I think we agreed we're given 30 seconds per update.
Maximum.
I've put all the Magdalens on the website. I'm working on putting the TV ones on. I put them in my dissertation and I've handed over to Alex. Done.
My last issue is just gone to print. Will be out next week. Handover is pretty much done. That's pretty much it. We've got a team of now 25 editors for next year, which is expanded from 6 when I took over.
Dumb.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
Any questions for media managers? Okay. School presidents updates.
Matthew's not here, Liz not here, Alfred isn't here, Greg's not here.
Okay. Any questions for school presidents on their updates?
No, however, I remember that I still haven't given a prize to Ron, Holly, or Kirsty, but I will at the President's Dinner. Are you all at the President's Dinner? Yeah.
What for?
Remember
What
for the SLTA, all the nominations. I know this is not really related to the updates, but I remembered like yesterday, and Prem didn't have anything good on offer, so I figured I'll volunteer.
Milk trays for a pound.
What?
Milk trays for a pound.
Milk trays.
Yeah, like.
I hate milk. I'm not touching that.
It's chocolate.
Chocolate.
I thought you meant like milk. Okay, I can deal with chocolate. We can do that.
Andrew just really likes milk.
I thought granted from wild.
It doesn't even get in cartons, Trace.
Straight up.
Okay, it's councillors' updates. Kieran's away. Alex.
Me.
Kaylee.
All right. I think so.
30 seconds. Go.
I studied, I did 2 exams. I met with someone about a brochure that I'm making once I finish my other exams. Done.
Maggie's not here. Miriam.
Carried on funding council for the Environmental Societies, staff thinking about handling and stuff like that. Met with commercial societies to talk about each society for events, directors installation, attended societies council, and staff is spreading the word about mechanical inspiration issue.
Thank you. Sean's not here anymore. Kevin.
Attended University Court. I attended loads of meetings to hand over, but that's not probably relevant to court things. So I attended court, gave them a warning. I was going to repeat earlier, but I did run out of time myself. It was my own fault. That if they continued on the path of student redundancies, it's the number one thing that's going to absolutely guarantee that we fall down in the NSS again. It's exactly what happened the last time the law went from the 10th in the UK to 15 to 7, and it was because there was a flap of things. So I told them that. I'm not sure how much they listened. Had a governance committee meeting, and I'm meeting the chair of the court on Thursday for a one-to-one
Almost had to be
performance review.
the countdown theme.
Any questions for any of the councillors about their updates? Okay, exec updates.
Councillors not here, Umar's not here.
Dom.
30 seconds. I started a new job and I do an afternoon a week here, which means that I go through emails. No, only kidding. I've been working on doing getting a new student graphic designer, as well as carrying off a few other projects like the EU debate, which is on Friday. So if you don't be there, I'll know. No, seriously, don't want to do. And yeah, I've just been enjoying my time in the new role, which is really good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Any questions for any of the exec about their updates? Okay. Becca, moving on to approval for.
Oh, right. I thought you were asking me about that. So, if you didn't know what the ELC is, it's the Election Liaison Committee, and in sort of coming up to the next set of elections, no, don't shout at me, next set of elections which will be headed up by Liam, the next VPR, which is the SRC elections in September, we need to co-opt an SRC member to be the student rep, who will be available to be an independent observer, have student voice. ELC meetings are usually pretty dull, not gonna lie. We just chat about regulations and stuff, nodding our heads. We argue about things that really don't need to be argued about. We talk about campaigns, campaigners. You get all the sort of election gossip in there as well. So as much as I'm trying to sell this to you, would anybody be keen to be the student, please don't. Would anybody be keen to be the student voice on the ELC for next year, starting 6 or 7 weeks from the elections, which would be sort of mid-August. So if anybody's around during the summer.
I wouldn't do it. I think most of us are graduating.
So everybody who is a SRC councillor here will be SRC councillors until the next elections. So they can be the independent voice.
Oh yeah, of course, for the next set of SRC elections. Sorry, I'm stupid.
No, you wouldn't be school president, so it's just normal councillors that
It
are
would be
graduating.
normal councillors because the school presidents technically hand over on the 1st of July. Same with the exec and same with the chair and independent member report. So any volunteers? It looks great in your CV.
Stroke.
Anyone's eligible. Like,
Well, I think most of us are either
However,
graduating or
if you're
president.
considering rerunning, you can't be on ELC.
you
So
can.
it'd be
Well, no,
better
if you're
if it was
rerunning for
really
SRC councillors, then yeah, you can't sit on it obviously. But
It'd be better
anybody
if it was
who from July then. But if anybody's interested, no.
Can't do it.
Yeah.
Most of us are leaving or running for SSC again.
Or as president.
Posting the Facebook page, maybe there's more people.
It needs to be done by vote, that's the thing. It needs to be done through a co-option from the SRC. But you know what, that's fine. If nobody's keen to do it from here, then what we'll do is we'll take it back to the ELC and it can be done from the new set of school presidents. Because I'm sure one of them would be dead keen to do it.
They don't know.
Well, yeah, I'll sell it to them differently.
This is amazing.
It is incredible, like you get to
Well,
find
Liam will be chairing it.
Yeah.
So, Liam, please sell it.
Great start.
Representation right there.
No, actually, no. You get to talk about it quite a lot. It's sort of the whole reform of bylaw. Someone take my shovel away from me.
You'll get a free ticket to the postgraduate soiree.
Or Blue Peter.
And a Blue Peter bag.
Not feeling for that one.
You do get a ticket to SLTA. And a plus one.
You get 2 tickets to SLTA, so it's kind of, it's worth it.
No,
Great. It's
We're
like,
gonna
no,
sell
please
that at a
we'll
later
leave
date.
it then.
So next item on the agenda.
Oh, right. So, you might have seen in the, I'm so sorry, you might have seen in the agenda that there was a note about the Academic Council. Tim was supposed to talk to you about it today. It's essentially the reform of the School President's Forum. What I'll do is I'll tell him to send you out the papers. It's basically talking about who will be president on the Academic Council. There's no need for a bylaw change, as the School President's Forum isn't even mentioned in the bylaws anyway, so it will be a subcommittee of the SRC, which actually includes school presidents, co-presidents, associate presidents, and learning and teaching reps. Any questions on that? No? Cool. You got one question?
No, not a question, but another thing.
AOCB?
So Tim just got an email from someone at Dusa saying, can you maybe ask the members of SRC to have a little more respect for staff toilets, use them before the meeting and they're fine, and go and use them now during the break, and it looks like they have pissed and spilt water all over the floor and seat as well, trying to flush blue roll down the male toilet. They're now been locked, so we can't use them. So please have respect for the building and the toilets. It might not be one of us, let's be honest. Well, it wasn't me, so yeah.
You went to the cinema.
That's on camera as well.
I never see the best argument against anarchism is men's toilets, because they're always fucked.
One morning for swearing.
Have respect.
Jump on that bandwagon.
And just have
Well,
respect.
it's still really
Any other AOCB?
You're the biggest thing.
Okay, Becca?
First point is that we've got pizza after the meeting, and yes, Dominic Younger, they are pizzas from Lyre, so you can suck it up. We've got like 12 pizzas, like we've got a lot of food coming, so I hope you're hungry. And second of all, can we get a massive round of applause for Gillian for chairing the SRCs this year?
And while we're on thank yous, just like to say a massive thank you to Dusa TV for live streaming every single meeting.
And a round of applause for yourselves.
Yay.
Come on. You did alright.
We're
We
still
can
here.
celebrate on Saturday at the President's Dinner. Is everyone going?
Yeah.
We've got full bar tabs.
Don't tell them that.
Friday night, EU debate. Have we got an update on that? Do you know what's...
Yep, we now have a full panel. So we have Mev Brown, who is the spokesperson for Britain for Business. Bonnie Scanlon, NUS Scottish President, so that could be fun, no clapping. We also have Braden Daly, who is the Assistant Director for Boldly, and we have Professor Sir Principal Pete Dance. So get along, ask some questions. There will be a big debate, and it should be a lot of fun. It's in the Darcy Thompson Theatre, so pop along if you're free.
And if you can't make it in person, it'll be live streamed.
It's going to be live streamed, of course, by the amazing Dusa TV.
So what time does that kick off?
7 o'clock. They'll be there early. 5.
4.
And they're
You
probably
might as well
linked
start
around
camping fun.
somewhere.
Thursday, you know.
It's going to be any other AOC? Okay, let's go get pizza.